Is this just an ordinary statement being blown out of proportion, or a long-hidden confession that quietly marks the beginning of the most emotional farewell in BTS history, spoken just before the US tour begins, when Jungkook finally talks and Kim Taehyung's reaction leaves ARMY completely speechless? That question exploded across digital spaces without warning, echoing from one timeline to another, crashing straight into the emotions of millions of fans who barely had time to breathe before. Fragments of Jungkook's words began circulating widely. There was no explicit goodbye, no clear, official announcement, and that is precisely where the unease lies. In the world of BTS, silence often speaks louder than press conferences. This time, Taehyung's silence, V of BTS, became the center of speculation that pushed ARMY to ask, in tones that were almost academic yet deeply emotional, is V's absence from the US tour a sign of something far bigger than mere scheduling or individual projects? Before the US tour begins, the atmosphere surrounding BTS has already been thick with tension that is difficult to capture in a single word. Historically, every BTS tour is not merely a series of concerts, but a global cultural event, a social phenomenon studied by scholars of music, media, and even pop sociology. When one member is absent, it is not simply a gap in stage formation, but a major variable that alters the emotional, symbolic, and narrative dynamics of the entire group. So when news of V's absence began to gain traction, the public waited for one thing: clarification. What arrived instead was Jungkook's statement, honest, calm, almost philosophical, which, rather than easing concerns, ignited even more questions. Jungkook did not speak dramatically. That is what made it hit harder. He chose simple, reflective words, as if speaking to himself while simultaneously addressing millions. He talked about journeys, about time, about how not all togetherness can last in the same form forever. To a casual listener, it might have sounded like an ordinary reflection ahead of a major tour. But to ARMY, who are trained by years of experience to read between the lines, it felt like a clue, too subtle to be called an announcement, yet too heavy to be ignored. V's reaction became the next chapter, far quieter, yet infinitely louder. There was no lengthy statement, no direct clarification,
no denial.
What existed instead were facial expressions, body language, and an attitude caught by cameras, or, more strikingly, his absence from spaces he would normally occupy. In modern celebrity culture, especially in K-pop, absence itself is text. Non-presence is narrative. And Taehyung, in his own way, wrote that narrative without uttering a single word. ARMY fell silent. Not the silence of indifference, but a collective pause, an emotional suspension where millions attempted to assemble scattered fragments of information. Is this a farewell? A temporary pause? Or a transformation that slowly reshapes BTS into something different from what the world has long known? Viewed through a more academic lens, this dynamic is fascinating. For years, BTS has built a narrative of togetherness that is not only musical, but existential. They do not merely sell songs. They sell lived journeys, growth, conflict, reconciliation. Each member represents a distinct emotional archetype, and V, with his artistic sensitivity and enigmatic aura, plays a crucial role in that balance. When one archetype disappears, the emotional system is shaken. This is why questions about V's absence from the US tour cannot be reduced to logistics. This is a question of identity. Jungkook, often described as the emotional center of BTS's newer era, seems acutely aware of the symbolic weight carried by every word he speaks. That is why his honesty feels both grounding and emotionally dangerous. He promises nothing. He denies nothing. He simply speaks of accepting change. And that is where ARMY's sense of security begins to waver. Because in BTS's history, change has always come at a significant emotional cost. So why did V's reaction, or lack of it, become such a freezing point? Because Taehyung has long been known as expressive, spontaneous, sometimes eccentric, but always present. When he chooses silence, When he refrains from filling the space with familiar words or gestures, the public reads it as a conscious decision, a stance, a statement without sound. And for many ARMY, that is far more unsettling than any official announcement could be. Speculation inevitably spiraled. Some argue this is a strategic management move, others see it as a natural phase of individual artistic growth, while a few dare to speak the word most people fear: separation. But what kind of separation? A physical absence from the tour, or a symbolic farewell to an era? Or perhaps this is BTS, or part of BTS, testing the fragile boundary between togetherness and individuality on an ever-demanding global stage. What makes the situation even more emotional is its timing. A US tour has always symbolized BTS's global expansion, a proving ground in the world's most competitive music market. These absence at such a pivotal moment feels strange, almost paradoxical. If this were merely about solo projects, why now? If it were about personal needs or health, why not explain more explicitly? It is the vacuum of information that allows the feeling of loss to grow, and his honesty. Jungkook seems to open a door that has long remained closed.
He does not say this is the end.
But he also does not say everything will remain the same. And for fans who have grown alongside BTS for more than a decade, the phrase "not the same" sounds like an alarm. Because BTS, for many, is not just a music group. They're a marker of time, a life soundtrack, a symbol of emotional stability in a world that changes too fast. ARMY's silence is not apathy. It is the opposite. It is the first stage of collective grief, even before the loss has truly occurred. And perhaps that is the greatest shock of all, that a single honest statement and a single quiet reaction could shake the emotional foundation of a global fandom. Is this a farewell? The most honest answer for now may be, not necessarily, but the possibility no longer feels impossible. And it is precisely that uncertainty that makes this story so powerful, so irresistibly click-inducing, yet profoundly human. BTS has always taught that it is okay not to know, to doubt, to fear change. This time, the lesson feels painfully real because they themselves are living inside it. As the US tour approaches, the stages will still blaze with light, the cheers will still roar, and Jungkook will still stand there with a powerful voice. But between the lights and the music, there will be an invisible empty space, a space usually filled by V. And every time that space is felt, the question will return, again and again, lingering long after the tour ends. Is this just a pause, or the beginning of a farewell that was never officially announced? And perhaps, like so many pivotal moments in BTS history, the answer will not arrive through press conferences or official statements, but through small gestures, half-spoken words, or a silence that once again chooses to speak louder than any sound. The emotional weight of that unanswered question continues to follow every new development, because in the BTS universe, timing is never accidental. Fans have learned this through years of releases, pauses, symbolic gestures, and carefully chosen silences. When something happens right before a major tour, especially a US tour, it is rarely insignificant. The absence of V does not exist in isolation. It exists in contrast to everything BTS has historically represented: unity, balance, and the promise that even individual paths ultimately circle back to the group. What makes this moment particularly unsettling is how familiar yet unfamiliar it feels. BTS has gone through transitions before. Solo projects, temporary separations, military discussions, creative breaks. All of these have been navigated with reassurance and clarity. This time, however, clarity feels deliberately incomplete. Jungkook's words acknowledge reality without defining it. V's silence accepts attention without redirecting it. Together, they form a narrative that feels unfinished, like a sentence deliberately left without a period. Observers have begun to notice how Jungkook's demeanor has subtly shifted since that moment. His performances remain powerful, his professionalism untouched, but there is a different texture to his presence. It is not weakness, nor is it fear. It feels more like awareness. the awareness of standing at a threshold where the past and future overlap uncomfortably. In academic discussions of performance psychology, this kind of state is often described as liminal, a condition of being in between, no longer fully anchored to what was, but not yet settled into what will be. V's position within this liminal space is even more complex. Taeyong has always embodied contradiction. He is both classical and experimental, deeply introspective yet playfully unpredictable. His artistic instincts often push beyond conventional idol frameworks, and fans have long celebrated that. But when such an artist steps back at a moment of collective movement, the gesture invites interpretation. Is he protecting something deeply personal? Is he redefining his relationship with the group? Or is he simply choosing silence as the only honest response to questions that cannot yet be answered? The emotional reaction from ARMY reflects this uncertainty. Instead of outrage or celebration, what dominates is contemplation. Social spaces once filled with theories and excitement now carry a quieter tone, almost reverent. Fans are rewatching old interviews, old concerts, old moments of shared laughter, not out of nostalgia alone, but out of a need to understand continuity. They are asking whether those moments were building toward this one, whether the seeds of this pause were planted long ago. From a broader cultural perspective, this moment reveals something profound about BTS's relationship with their audience. Most pop groups rely on spectacle to maintain attention. BTS, however, has cultivated meaning. Their audience does not merely consume content, they interpret it. They analyze pauses, phrasing, glances, and timing with the seriousness of literary scholars. In that context, Jungkook's honesty and V's silence function almost like opposing texts, one spoken, one unspoken, each demanding interpretation. The question of whether this is a farewell persists because farewells are rarely announced when they are most authentic. They are felt first. They arrive as discomfort, as emotional distance, as changes in rhythm. And while there is no confirmation that this moment represents an ending, it undeniably represents a shift. The absence of V from the US tour changes how the tour will be remembered, regardless of its success. It becomes a chapter marked not only by what happened on stage, but by who was not there. Yet, within all this uncertainty, there is also restraint. Neither Jungkook nor V has dramatized the situation. There are no tearful confessions, no cryptic accusations, no forced narratives. This restraint suggests respect for the group's history, for the fans' emotional investment, and perhaps for the complexity of the truth itself. Not every truth, after all, is ready to be spoken. Some fans cling to hope, pointing out that absence does not equal departure, that pauses can be necessary for longevity rather than signs of collapse. Others quietly prepare themselves for change, believing that loving BTS also means accepting transformation, even when it hurts. Both responses coexist, neither canceling the other out. This emotional duality mirrors BTS's own message over the years, that it is possible to hold fear and faith at the same time. As the US tour unfolds, every performance will carry an added layer of meaning. Every harmony will remind listeners of the missing voice. Every choreography formation will subtly echo an absence. And in that space, fans will continue to listen, not just to the music, but to what remains unsaid. Because in this moment, silence is not emptiness. It is a question still waiting for its answer. Whether this chapter ultimately reveals itself as a temporary divergence or the quiet beginning of a farewell, one thing is already certain. BTS has once again found itself at the center of a deeply human story. A story about growth, uncertainty, honesty, and the courage to stand still when the world expects movement. And perhaps that is why this moment feels so heavy. It is not just about a tour or an absence or a statement. It is about the fragile, emotional truth that nothing meaningful stays the same forever, and that sometimes the hardest part is not knowing what comes next. For now, ARMY waits. Not impatiently, not angrily, but attentively. Because if BTS has taught the world anything, it is that answers often come quietly, in their own time, when the silence has said everything it needs to say. That waiting quiet and attentive, has begun to reshape how this entire moment is perceived, because time itself has become part of the narrative. Each passing day, without clarification, adds another layer of meaning, another emotional echo that fans cannot simply ignore. In popular culture, prolonged ambiguity is often accidental. In the BTS universe, it rarely feels that way. The group has always been deliberate about how stories unfold, and that history makes every delay feel intentional, even when reality may be far more complex. What intensifies the emotional gravity is the contrast between movement and stillness. The tour moves forward. Rehearsals continue. Stages are built. Promotional images circulate. Yet within all that motion, V's absence remains fixed, like a quiet center around which everything else revolves. Psychologically, this creates a tension that audiences instinctively feel. Humans are wired to seek closure, and when closure is withheld, emotions linger longer and sink deeper. Jungkook's role within this unfolding story continues to draw attention, not because he is trying to explain anything further, but because his presence feels more exposed than before. He is carrying not just his own performance, but the unspoken questions of the audience. His sincerity, once comforting, now feels almost raw. Each smile, each pause between words, is interpreted through the lens of what might be missing. It is an unfair burden, yet one he seems to accept with quiet resolve. Meanwhile, Taehyung's silence is taken on a life of its own. Silence, when sustained, transforms into language. Fans analyze past patterns, recalling moments when V chose art over explanation, when he retreated inward during periods of personal transition. This history does not provide answers, but it provides context. It suggests that silence, for him, is not avoidance, but alignment, choosing not to speak until words feel true enough to carry the weight placed upon them. This dynamic has also shifted how the group itself is perceived. BTS has long been framed as a symbol of constancy in an unstable industry. Their longevity, their unity, and their transparency have set them apart. Now they're being seen in a more vulnerable light, not weaker, but more human. The idea that even BTS can face moments without clear solutions resonates deeply with fans who are navigating uncertainty in their own lives. Culturally, this moment challenges the expectation that idols must always reassure. There is an unspoken demand in fandom spaces for clarity, for emotional safety, for guarantees that nothing cherished will change. By not providing immediate answers, BTS, and particularly Jungkook and V,